Hello everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be profiling an updated mutant list that I've been working on. I know we are very close to the release of the Shizu cards, and obviously that's going to kind of blow the meta out of the water as far as competitive play goes. And that's going to really obviously affect what decks are and are not kind of playable in the upcoming meta, just because it is going to be so dominant. So today I'm profiling my mutant deck. It's definitely more on the casual side of things, definitely for a local level, but you know, it can main deck shifter, and if your deck can main deck shifter, you can at least have that as a fallback or something that you can kind of use to combat those cards on just the local level. I mean, you're not going to be winning a YCS or anything with mutants, but it's a fun deck to play, and there are some new tools that the deck's kind of got available now, which just makes it just that little bit better. But we'll get straight into my list. The mutant monsters, we're still of course running the 3 MO5 and the 3 ST46. This is your bread and butter. MO5 will search ST46. ST46 can search the trap, and then the trap can summon MO5 again, so you can kind of loop these not indefinitely. I've actually cut down on the trap a little bit just because we're actually running a lot of starters. I wanted to kind of just cut down on that a little bit. But yeah, these are your go-tos, and then Mutant is another starter card, which is also really good because this deck does have issues with your hand advantage, card advantage, and keeping cards in hand. Mutant at least allows you to use resources in the deck, which banishes them too, so they can be recurred with your mutant monsters. So a common setup would be, you know, one of these guys as well as mutant to then set up Beast and Arsenal, because when the Beast is destroyed by your opponent, you can recur the trap that you used with mutant to get some kind of value back. So they are the small mutants that we're playing, so 3, 3, and 2. For the bigger mutants, we're on just one of each. There can be situations, if for example you haven't had access to Mutant Cry, where you may, you know, be out of one of the bigger mutants to use, but you don't want to run any more of these because they are bricks. You know, there's definitely an argument for a second Beast, but I wouldn't do it. These cards on their own do effectively nothing. They're just banish fodder generally for the smaller mutants, but if you're not sure what they do, Arsenal can't be targeted by traps, Beast can't be targeted by monsters, and Mist can't be targeted by spells. Arsenal, when a monster effect is activated by your opponent, can banish a card from hand or field to banish a monster on the field. Beast can negate a spell trap by banishing a card, and Mist can draw 2 when a trap is activated by banishing a card. So they're always banishing cards, and that's obviously the whole gimmick of the deck, but the deck really does neg because of this. One of the cards that we play to kind of counteract this is Nemesis Keystone. Currently I only own the one copy. I probably would play a second. It's a tricky card to play as well. I mean, it's a free special summon if you've got to banish monsters, which you definitely would have. And then in the end phase, if it's currently banished and was banished that turn, you can add it back to your hand. So I kind of see it as a recurable bullet for your mutants. You know, you banish it off MO5, for example, to summon Beast, add it back to your hand, banish it off Beast's effect to negate a spell trap. In the end phase, add it back to your hand. So you've always kind of got it in rotation. You only really want you only need one in rotation, but a second copy could be good as just a special summonable monster if you need extension. But I'm currently just playing one, and I mean, there's times where you can dig for it with Prosperity and grab it like that, but you know, I might find room for a second one in the future. I'm still playing one Recover. I just think that the synchro monsters you can access, particularly Virtual World Shen, is just it's a really good card. Obviously, it's not super ideal against something like Tia, because they're all milling cards from the deck, and Shen doesn't affect those cards milled to the from deck to grave, but it's still a really good card. It floats as well when it's in the graveyard, and you know, because we're playing so many one card starters with the E-Tellies and the smaller mutants, If you've got a smaller mutant and an E-Teller, you can definitely just use one to summon Recover, set up Shen, and because you're paying life points with Mutant, the Recover can come back, no worries, and if you've used Prosperity, it's free extension as well. It can recur itself from the graveyard. That's it for the monsters as far as just the engine goes. Then of course we're playing 3 Dimension Shifter. It's the only reason you'd consider picking this deck up at the moment, because you can play Shifter and really you want to be under Shifter at all times. It's actually really frustrating having spells and traps put into the graveyard. It's definitely an argument for playing something like Dimension Fissure or Macrocosmos, which I don't own at the moment, but definitely cards that, you know, especially Dimension Fissure, that you can just activate it. You'd happily sit under it, because once your resources are banished, you can recur them really easily. So Dimension Shifter is incredible. If you open it, you're always going to activate it and use it. The other hand trap, I suppose you'd say, that we're playing at the moment is the Bistards. Now, in Australia, we've had a bit of an issue in kind of getting the cards. I know my orders from Darkwing Blast have slowly started to come in, so I will have my Bistard cards very, very soon, but you have to just excuse the proxies for now. But I'm playing the 3 Magnamut and the 2 Druisworm. The really cool thing about the Bistard cards is that they kind of serve 2 purposes. Obviously, they banish cards from the opponent's graveyard and they interrupt the tier side of the Tirashizu deck, but then as well they sit on the field and can be banished as bullets again for your mutant monsters. So rather than a hand trap that you'll just discard and it's gone, these use their effect, so you get the hand trap effect and that just sits on the field, and you know, you can still use the Magna effect. You obviously will probably lose the Druisworm effect. You will lose it if you banish it off of a mutant, but it's served a purpose. So they're kind of like this dual utility where you get 2 uses out of that 1 card. And so for a deck like Mutant, that's super important because of the big card advantage issues that the deck does have inherently. Then for the spells, 3 E-Telly, we're going to play it while it's legal. This is a card that I'm not sure about at the moment. It's Prosperity. Prosperity is going to be great for digging for those board breaker cards that we're playing, or for like the Bistards, for example. Obviously, you can't dig for Dimension Shifter because Prosperity will be in the graveyard, so you can't use the Dimension Shifter. But Prosperity being able to dig for like a specific card is really cool. And the other big benefit to Prosperity is you can play a real extra deck, not just an extravagance-based extra deck, which I do like. Even though, you know, the deck Mutants don't really use the extra deck outside of the fusions, it's just nice to have the utility in the extra deck. But the only issue I have with Prosperity is that it's only adding 1 card. Now I know it's a selected card, and you do get a bit of say in what it is, but the big draw to extravagance is being able to +1. And again, I mentioned before, but in a deck where you're already minusing quite heavily to use the mutant effects, having extravagance is definitely a good card. But the selectable nature of Prosperity and the fact that you can play a real extra deck is currently why I'm using Prosperity. And you know, being able to dig for, let's say, that 1 copy of Nemesis Keystone. So it just kind of feels like I'm playing 4 copies of Keystone, even though, you know, it's not necessarily going to be in the top 6 cards of your deck, which again, I'm always banishing 6 for Prosperity because the only cards that really matter are the fusions, except in some niche scenarios. The last 2 spells is just 1 Evolution Lab and 1 Mutant Fusion. The Mutant Fusion doesn't come all that often. It's kind of just there as another search target. The Mutant Fusion could be my 3rd Mutant Cry, which wouldn't be terrible. But it's just, yeah, between the Cry and the Fusion, I'm playing 3 Fusion spell traps. And then Evolution Lab is pretty good. In a hand where you have MO5 and ST46, you can kind of do both. You can use ST46, banish the MO5 for Beast, pull back the banished MO5, and then get its effect to search, as well as then setting up like a Mist, for example. So it's just a useful card to have at 1. You don't need more than it though, more than 1. For the traps, playing 2 Mutant Cry with 1 expansion. So I'm kind of really being quite fussy over just the engine cards. So just playing 1 expansion at the moment and just 2 Cry. Cry is definitely something you could play at 3, especially over, like, for example, that Mutant Fusion. You could play it at 3 for that. But Mutant Cry is essential for kind of keeping the resources going. You can kind of loop your deck indefinitely with Mutant Cry, especially if your level 8s are getting destroyed by your opponent. And then the last cards, playing There Can Be Only One. I'll have to wait and see as far as kind of what the tier issues your decks are doing, if this is worth it or not. We can play under it really nicely. We do occasionally have some issues where you might have Mutant Cried for Synthesis and then you're unable to normal summon MO5 or ST46 because that's a second Psychic. So that's the only kind of the conflict that you have between There Can Be Only One and the deck. But otherwise, it's a pretty good card, and definitely against something like Sprite, it's pretty useful. I'll have to just see, we'll just wait and see if it is useful this format. Then I'm playing 3 Impermanents, and I'm currently on 3 Evenly Matched. Just to kind of have that big blowout card going second. I think Evenly Matched is just a crazy card. Again, it may change, but between Shifter, the Bestial monsters, the Evenly Matched, and the Imperm, we've got a lot of kind of going second cards, which this deck is typically, you'd call it a trap deck, of course, but I think it's really hard to be a trap deck in 2022. You kind of need to just cut down on the traps where you can and play more of the hand trap style cards that are more high impact if you can. If your deck can still kind of play around them. And because the Mutant engine itself is pretty recurable, we can kind of afford to play these more single-use things like the Bistids and the Imperms and stuff like that. But if I don't play There Can Be Only One, I'll play some other Floodgate. For example, something like Summon Limit's pretty crazy, of course. The only issue is if you're going second with Summon Limit, it doesn't really do anything to stop your opponent, whereas like There Can Be Only One, depending on what board your opponent has set up, they can be forced to cut some things from their board if There Can Be Only One resolves. For the extra deck, I'll just kind of zoom through this because most of it is fairly irrelevant. I'm playing 2 Ultimates and 3 Synthesis. You probably don't need the second Ultimates, but it's there. These are the targets for recover. So 1 Shen Shen and 1 Cheng Ying. Cheng Ying's pretty cool because again, we're always banishing cards. The Synthesis is level 9, whereas the other main deck Mutants are level 8. So Shen Shen and Cheng Ying, depending on, I guess, the situation, this will be like a turn 3 play. It's never going to be turn 1 because you're not summoning this turn 1. But if the Synthesis sticks to the field, you can definitely Cheng Ying with the recover into. You can make the Cheng Ying, and you're always banishing cards, so the Cheng Ying's pretty strong. Then playing Dingisu into Pain Gainer into Zeus. If you're in a position with 2 level 8s on the field and you need to kind of board wipe, but again, it's really niche. It's really coming up. So you're going to be banishing this off Prosperity a lot of the time, banishing the second Ultimus a lot of the time. And then I'm just playing some Link monsters that can come up at different times. So just the 1 Zeroboros, Blackluster Soldier, because we've got lots of big levels, Unicorn, and then the main links we're using are going to be Dark and Area. Area is a way of kind of playing around the lock that's, but if you've got Synthesis and There Can Be Only One, if you've got another monster, which it depends on the situation. I mean, this deck doesn't summon a whole lot of monsters, but you've got Area as a way of kind of linking off the waters, which Synthesis is, and we're in a format where the best decks often are playing water monsters, whether it's a Nimble monster or if it's a Rhino Heart, for example. So the Area kind of should always have a target, which allows you to extend into the Unicorn or extend into the Blackluster Soldier, depending on what you're taking and what you've already got. Dark is just because you've got the Bestials and everyone's playing Darks. So if you can play Dark the Dark Charmer, it's not a bad option. And then depending on what you summon back, again, you could go into Zeroboros, for example. But you're only really accessing these big links if you've used the small links to get there, because otherwise you're not going to extend to that point. But that's the current main and extra deck, and I'll just do a couple of test hands to kind of show you what we can do. Okay, so I'll just do some quick fire test hands. There's not really much to play out in this deck. It's normal summon mutant, summon big mutant, set cards, something like that. So we will draw Duosworm, E-Telly and Prosperity. There Can Be Only One, and ST46. So in a setup like this, we've got ST46 with E-Telly. So this could be Shen Shen if we want it to be. potentially, if that's the way we want to do it. But what we can do here is normal summon the ST46. And the way that I like to play this deck is I like to always ensure that I've got follow-up. So in this example, what I'll do is I'm going to grab Cry, which doesn't represent the follow-up, but the E-Telly does. So we're not necessarily going to activate the E-Telly here. We'll activate the Prosperity. The 6 targets we'll banish are the 6 here, the 2 Link Monsters, the 3 Xyz, and 1 Ultimus. So we'll banish them, reveal 6. So I've got Imperm, Mutant, 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 Mist, ST46, and ST46. Could do with some more shuffling, but in this case, we could take one of the ST46s for further follow-up, just depending on, if we feel like Cry, there can be only one, and the Druid Swarm is going to be enough as far as, interrupting our opponent. Plus we'll have, this could represent Beast. Could grab Mutant, Mutant here. Because we also need something to actually banish with the ST46. But what we could do here, if we don't want to kind of minus in hand advantage that much, we could hold the E-Telly, like I said, if we want to hold it as the follow-up, or we could, what we can do is we'll tribute the ST46, we can banish the Mutant, Mutant, and we'll summon Beast. And then again, depending on what we want to do, we've got these that we're going to set these to. The E-Telly, we can either hold it as just follow up, or we can use it. I don't think in this case we want to go Shen, but what we could do is we could actually just bring out the second Mutant, Mutant. We could use its effect, tribute, and we'll banish from the deck our 1 expansion, and that's going to summon our Arsenal. So then as far as our disruptions go, we've got an extra disruption. It does mean that our follow-up was a little bit affected, but we get follow-up with Cry. So what we want to do here is Synthesis requires monsters with different attributes. So we will have to, for their effects going into our next turn, or going into our opponent's turn, we will have to banish one of these per its effect. The one I would be banishing is Beast. So this is the one we want banished. Whether we banish it off of Arsenal or if its own effect, doesn't really matter, but this is the one we want to end up banished, because then we want to Cry to put it back. Just because it's more likely that we're going to have a monster going into the next turn to then summon a Beast back again. Okay, so what we potentially could do is, we could use the Druid Swarm at some point in our opponent's turn, and then we could use the Druid Swarm as the bullet for the Beast effect. So there we go, we've negated a spell trap, we obviously banished a light or a dark. Arsenal can banish the Beast at some point, and then we can use Mutant Cry and put back the Beast, and we can leave this one banished, but we'll put that the Beast and the Mutant here. It does get shuffled, I just put it at the bottom, but summon Synthesis, and that'll pop a card as well. So there's an additional disruption. And then if Synthesis is outed, we can add back the expansion or the Mutant. We're not getting any value off the Arsenal being banished, or destroyed, sorry, because it adds back a mutant spell. Synthesis just adds back a mutant card, but it's better for Beast to be in the deck. What we want to recur back, well, we can actually recur back either of these, doesn't really matter, because they both represent the ability to play. It's probably actually better to grab the Mutant off Synthesis if it gets destroyed or outed by opponent. We actually kind of really want this to be outed, because obviously there can be only one as well, but if it doesn't get added, we can link off for area. It's not a good play though. Anyway, that's the first one. So kind of a various amount of disruptions. We'll play out, draw a few hands and see what we get. There can be only one, Druid Swarm, evenly matched, MO5, and E-Telly. So obviously in a case like this, going first, the evenly matched is useless, but going second, it's good to know we've got just something. Plus obviously the Jerusalem, so we've got 2 things going second, which is not terrible. All right, well, we can use MO5. Or actually what we probably even rather do is go eTele for ST46. Because again, where we can get access to Mutant Cry, we like getting access to Mutant Cry. So we'll grab the Cry here. Okay, and then we can normal summon the MO5. Instead of grabbing Mutant in this case, we'll grab ST46 because that's going to represent our follow-up. And then what we can do is, in this case, the evenly match obviously is a dead card, so we know that we can get rid of that. Actually, sorry, instead of searching ST46, yeah, no, we'll keep it there. We can just banish it. So what we can do is we can go ST46 and evenly matched to bring out Arsenal. And then in this case, we could go MO5 and ST46 to bring out Beast. And then we've got, again, there can be only one Mutant Cry, plus the Jerusalem. Again, the follow-up, we had to lose it a little bit there. There was probably a play involving Mutant that we could have done instead. But yeah, in any case, that's that one. We'll do this as our last one. So we have eTele, ST46, ST46, Arsenal, and Impermanent. So this is a pretty awful hand. Opening these never feels good. So what we can do here, we can do a Shen thing here if we want to. So we can normal summon the ST46. Can search for. Actually, just search for mutant here. So we can use ST46, banish Arsenal, summon Beast. What did I do wrong? Oh, we can't search mutant, sorry. It was ST46. We searched Cry. Got the wrong way. If that was MO5 though, that was actually pretty good. But no, Cry's good. We'll grab Cry. And then what we'll do is we can use eTele here. We can bring out Mutant. We'll do this because then we can tribute it off, banish a resource from the deck. It's got to be a spell in this case because we've got Arsenal banished. But we'll bring out Mist. It's just going to represent a body, I guess, at this point. The other thing we can do is obviously once we'll set our cards, we've got the follow-up with the ST46, but we have the ability here to cry into Ultimus, which is the negation. So because we've got access to all 3 of our level 8s in this situation. But otherwise, that's going to do it for this one. It's definitely, like I said, it's more of a fun deck to play for sure. But it does have some tools that allow it to combat what's going on in the meta at the moment. But I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.